Welcome to the University of Manitoba Alumni and Friends Virtual Learning for Life program. My name is Tracy Bowman. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Manitoba and a very proud alumna. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thank you to all of you for joining us and making this event part of your day. We're able to offer this program free to all of our alumni and friends around the world thanks to the very generous sponsorship of our affinity partner, IA Financial Group. Many thanks to them. You can learn more about the insurance options that they offer alumni on our alumni website. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping details. Today's session is being recorded like we normally do, and will be posted to our website and the YouTube channel in the next day or two, and we'll share that link with you so you're able to view it again and share it with friends and family. I encourage you to check out the other previous lectures that we've hosted over the last 18 to 20 months on a wide array of topics. There's 25 plus topics that are on our YouTube channel. In terms of the Q&A, we'll be using Slido again, which is what we typically do. So that website is www.slido.com, and the password is VLFL17. So that is the way that you're able to pose your questions to today's presenter. And as soon as you have those questions in mind, please type away. I'm monitoring that site throughout the presentation, and I'll just move your question over, and we'll show them at the end as soon as the presentation is done. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can, so I do encourage you to post your questions whenever they come to mind during the presentation. So I'm delighted to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Stephan Pflugmacher Lima, on the topic of microplastics and climate factors influencing the MP-toxicity on plants. So let me tell you a little bit about him. He recently joined the University of Manitoba as Dean of the Clayton H. Riddell Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources. He's received his PhD from the University of Munich and served as a full professor of ecological impact research and ecotoxicology at the Technical University of Berlin. He's also a professor of aquatic ecotoxicology in an urban environment at the University of Helsinki, where he runs a joint lab of applied ecotoxicology with the Korean Institute of Science and Technology. He's held administrative roles at the Technical University of Berlin and the University of Helsinki, in addition to serving the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the German Research Foundation, the Lithuanian Research Council, and as an advisory board member of Cancer Research and Biotechnology AG in Switzerland. So with that, over to you, Dr. Pflugmacher Lima.
Thank you very much, Tracy, for the nice introduction, and good afternoon all. Yeah, I'm happy that I can present you today a little bit of my own research, and that's in the field of ecotoxicology. As you see, the title, Climate Conditions Change the Ecotoxicity of Microplastics, the Bottle Cap Experiment. So we already heard the acknowledgement. I would like to read it again. The University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made in these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Yeah, who is worried about microplastics in cosmetics or food? I think when we look at the news, every one of us should be or will be. So having microplastics in milk or in sea salt, in various cosmetics, in your toothpaste, which you're using every day, that makes us worried about these plastics and that. And of course, when you look for microplastic or plastic in general from a publication site, you can see that publications on microplastic, they started already in 1990. And then there was a long lag phase where there was nothing done so far. And then it starts a little bit 2009, 2011, and goes up then 2017 until nowadays exponential. So we have much more publications coming up with adverse effects of microplastics or plastic itself, also on monitoring plastics in our environment. We all see these pictures. And I think when you look at these pictures, we are all getting very worried about plastic in our environment. And you see that the sea turtle is eating these plastic bag, mixing it up with their favorite food, which are jellyfish. So there are some more pictures on that. You see there's another turtle swimming around eating a plastic bag. And then we have even fish eating plastic bags. And yeah, look closely, please, at these plastic bag. And you will see it's always the same plastic bag, which obviously different animals are eating. And that makes me a little bit worried because, of course, it's strange that they eat the same plastic bag at different times, obviously. So I was thinking about I should get some own pictures of that. So I used this hot summer here in Manitoba to go to Lake Manitoba and to snorkel there and to dive there. And believe me, I found this very, very rare Manitoba mermaid. And my luck was really great. This mermaid was eating the same plastic bag. So if you look at that, it shows you that, of course, in the internet, there are a lot of pictures really bringing you into a special mood. But you have to take it with a grain of salt when you look at these pictures. There's a lot of plastic in our environment, undoubtedly, but some of the pictures are really photoshopped and you should not really take it seriously. Of course, the Manitoba mermaid, you should taking it very seriously on that. Let's see, a little bit about history about plastic. It was invented 1909. It's a polymer of phenol and formaldehyde, and it is called bakelite. I can remember my parents having this black telephone at home, and I can also remember these switches and some parts of cameras being made of this plastic, which was very modern and new of that. And it was invented by Leo Baekeland, who was mixing these phenol and formaldehyde together. So nowadays we have a lot of different types of plastic, and when you would like to know what it is, then normally you can just see it inside, for example, these bottle caps or printed on this plastic material, and they are numbered from 1 to 7. One is polyethylene terephthalate, that's normally bottles or something like that. We have high density polyethylene, which is numbered 2, which are, for example, some cups or some other stuff on that. We have polyvinyl chloride. When you wrap your sweets with that, that's polyvinyl chloride thing. We have low density polyethylene. Again, some bottles for washing materials is made out of that. If you have your coffee, then sometimes it's made of polypropylene. Then we have package material, it's polystyrene. And we have things in our clothing, which are then other plastic materials, and that's number 7. This is the recycling code, and you see it with these arrows. So when you have plastic trash, this is normally then sorted out according to these numbers, that it can be recycled accordingly to the material which it is. We know this plastic pollution in our ocean already since 1970s, when Captain James Moore was cruising the oceans and seeing these plastic swirls around that when he was going there with his sailing boat. So that's what it looks like in some areas, that you see really the plastic trash swimming on the ocean. So normally this is visible, big plastic bottles or some other plastic stuff swimming on the ocean. What we are talking about today is much, much smaller. And it's of course classified, because of course scientists would like to classify things in different boxes. So we have a microplastic, which is normally bigger than 25 millimeters. We have mesoplastics ranging from 5 to 25 millimeters. We have large microplastics from 1 to 5 millimeters, small microplastics from 100 nanometers to 1 millimeter. And then we have nanoplastics and nanoparticles, which are smaller than 100 nanometers on that. These are practical definitions made by man, and this is how we classify the plastic at the moment. Yeah, from plastic to microplastic and beyond. And we were, for an exhibition in Helsinki, doing this picture here, having a plastic bottle screw. And then you see that when you look at that with the years, this plastic bottle screw is decaying and then breaking apart. It gets smaller pieces, much smaller pieces, and then you end up with nanoplastic, which are fine like a powder on that. But it's still then in the environment, and this cycle takes years and years and years to happen. How does it come that this plastic is breaking down? And plastic normally is UV light sensitive. So when you put UV lights on that, it's changing its structure and condition. It gets more hard. It's breaking much more easier. Then there's reactive oxygen species, which are working also on plastic material, breaking bonds and making it more vulnerable to breaking apart. We have hydrolysis and humidity. So if, for example, the plastic stuff is ending up in our lakes, rivers, and in the ocean, the water will just also try to break the bonds between the carbon molecules. And then we have bacteria, we have temperature and mechanical action, which will then also contribute in the breakdown of this plastic material. All these processes are called weathering of plastics. So if we have plastics in our environment, normally all these processes are working on it and ending up the plastic to fine particles, which then we call microplastics. Of course, we have pollution solutions, and I'm always smiling when I see these wonderful designs of big ships working like a vacuum cleaner, cleaning the ocean from plastics. And the designs are wonderful. I think that's a great thing. But honestly, a simple fisher net is doing the job as well, because what is caught by these ships is really big plastic bottles like that one, or other big plastic stuff. And this is actually very easy to get out of the ocean. We don't need these special ships, just a fisher net will do. But then, what should we do then with them? How do we sort it? Where do we store it? What to do with them? And as you saw from my first slides, we have 7 different plastic materials, and to recycle them properly, actually we have to sort them. But if they are swimming already 10 years in the ocean and breaking apart, sometimes you can't read the recycling code anymore. So you have to analyze the plastic and to see what plastic type it is, and then to sort it, and that's a huge effort on that. So when we look at what is swimming at the moment in the ocean, it's 1.8 trillion pieces. That's approximately, and every day there comes a lot pieces more on that. It covers the area twice the size of Texas, and it's 88,000 tons of weight. These are some statistical numbers, and just to show you, the size of Texas is 1.1 the size of Manitoba, roughly, and 88,000 tons of weight. That's, and apologize for using Lufthansa because I'm a German, so Lufthansa is my carrier. That's 500 747 megatop airplanes on that. So that's quite a big number, and a lot of plastic we have, which is trash in our environment. So when I was start working on plastic, I built up an hypothesis. This is what you do as a scientist. So I said climate conditions change the overall ecotoxicity of microplastic. That was my hypothesis. And during that time, I was working for the University of Helsinki and living in Lahti. And you can see Lahti has these jumping sites for the Olympics, and a lot of snow, so very similar to what we have here in Winnipeg. And then I was thinking on having a different climate, so Singapore was on the list and Port Elizabeth in South Africa. So what we did is to go to all these places. And of course, you see that plastic trash is everywhere, whether it's now the rest of your coffee cups, or even the rolls of an office chair, some other bottle caps, some other plastics. And this is the picture, what you can imagine from Singapore. In the parks, you have these signs saying, no littering, fines up to 5,000 Singapore dollars if they see you doing that. Most of the pictures around these are taken from parks in Singapore, unfortunately. You'll see even the fine which you might get is not high enough to prevent people to throw their plastic into nature. Okay, so I was thinking on what to do and coming up with high density polyethylene, HDPE, which are around 30 million tons on the global market. And these are the bottle caps of that. Of course, you have plastic bags, shampoo bottles, washing powder bottles, milk bottles, and this is all made of these high density polyethylene. But for me, these bottle caps were interesting because I saw them laying around in Lahti, in Singapore, and in Port Elizabeth. So from there, this project idea evolved, and the experimental setup was pretty easy. We went to all these 3 locations, and we collecting bottle caps from Singapore, Port Elizabeth, and Lahti. We also went to a local supermarket to get new bottle caps, and then we used part of these new bottle caps and artificially aged them for 160 days at 70 degrees. This is what you can normally do with plastic if you would like to test plastic and the aging or weathering of plastic. You just put it in an oven for a certain amount of time, or you just put UV light on it. During that time, the oven seems a very good and convenient way to age the plastic. So let's have a look at the climate a little bit. As you can see, Lahti has an average temperature of 3.9 degrees, average temperature variation 24.3. We have a fairly good sunshine hours between 40 and 300 hours and UV index of 1 to 5. We have rainy days, 206, precipitation, 647 millimeters. The pH of the rain is 5.5, so it's a little bit more acid. And we have an humidity of 80%. This is data which is taken from this Köppen-Geigen classification, which means we have a continental climate on that. In Singapore, it's slightly warmer. It's 27.4 degrees. Temperature variance is not so big. It's only 1.3. We have sunshine hours of 125 to 190 hours. So that's more rainy season means on that. We have a UV index of 7 to 9, so stronger than in Lahti, and an average rainy day, which is 177 with precipitation of 198.2 millimeters. pH of the rain is 4.2, so even more acid, and a humidity of 84%. So according to this Köppen-Geigen classification, it's a tropical rainforest area. Going to Port Elizabeth, which is a kind of in between, we have 17.4 as temperature. We have temperature variation of 7.5 degrees. We have incredible sunshine hours, 2,818, we have a UV index of 4 to 5, and rainy days is 70, with a precipitation of 561 millimeters. The pH of the rain is in between Lahti and Singapore. It's 5.7, humidity is 77. And according to the Geiger-Köppen classification, it's a Mediterranean climate on that. So let's see. We work with bottle caps, and you can see bottle caps and then 100 years until we get microplastic out of that. That means a pretty long project period. So collecting that and then waiting until we get these fine microplastic when needed for experiments would take about 10 to 100 years. No one would fund these long projects, and honestly, I'm in an age where I probably would not survive these 100 years of the project time, so I would like to do it much quicker. You can use the hands of my PhD students. You saw it in this little video to make microplastic out of that, but normally we use these plastic shredder machines, which are very convenient. You put the bottle caps into it, and then little knives are just breaking it down until you have microplastic. So that means between 1 and 5 millimeters on size. Yeah, our experimental material, what we are using was Lepidium sativum, the garden cress. We used Rhizophora mangle, which is the red mangrove. We used Enchitrenus crypticus, which is a little worm living in the soil. It's an enchitrene worm. And then we used Triticum aestivum, which is wheat. And we just saw what adverse effects on the different life forms we have here can we see with the different plastic we had. So we started with Triticum aestivum, with the wheat, and that was work of my student, Saila Tallinen from University of Helsinki, and she was looking at germination, root and shoot lengths, oxidative stress induction, and antioxidative stress response in Triticum aestivum when we bring it together with microplastic particles in soil. So that's what we did. We had these microplastic particles in soil tubes like that one. Then we put one grain of these Triticum aestivum in it. We water it, and then we see the germination. So we had caps, we had controls, we had glass tubes with microplastic made of new caps, artificial age caps, Lahti collected caps, Singapore collected caps, and Port Elizabeth collected caps. So all different ones mixed singly in the soil, and then we see the germination of these plants. The controls, they were germinating quite normally. When we used the new bottle cap plastic, you see there's a slight reduction in the germination. The artificial aged one, it's also slightly reduced germination in that. It's the same with Lahti, and no effect if we look at Singapore and Port Elizabeth plastic. So plastic collected from these two sites, shredded and made these plant tests with that, showed no effect at all. When we look at the root lengths of wheat, so here that part of the wheat seedlings, you see that the controls, they have pretty long roots. The new plastic exposed seedlings, they had very, very short roots, which were significantly smaller than the controls. Artificial aged, statistically no difference. Then Lahti, there's again a significant different root lengths from the seedlings, and no effect, no statistical effects from Singapore and Port Elizabeth plastics. So that was interesting to see that not only the germination and early stage plant test is in fact is affected by plastic, but also the length of the roots. The same with the shoots. You see it already in the picture on the left side. There's a significant reduction in the length of these seedlings when it's exposed to plastic from new bottle caps. then a slightly reduced effect with artificial aged one. The Lahti again shows a very significant effect, and there are no really significant effects with plastic collected in Singapore and Port Elizabeth again. So what ecological implications do we have on that? Smaller plants, less seeds, maybe a population shift, maybe an effect on biodiversity when we have plastic in our soil. Economically implications, slower germination, there's a time shift in how the farmer can work on his fields, and maybe less yield. So that makes the farmer for sure cry. Smaller plants, less seeds, less yield. Again, the farmer will cry on that. And this is what might happen if we have plastic in our agricultural soils. So we shifted to a worm, to this Anchytrain crypticus, and we would like to interview this worm. Do you like microplastic in soil, yes or no? And how to interview a little worm, and how to communicate with a worm. And this is very easy. We just look at his behavior. We can't talk with him for sure, but we can look at his behavior on that. And that's what we did. So we mixed microplastic from the different locations and treatments into soil, and then we give these little worm a choice. So we had controls where the whole porcelain tray was without any plastic. Then we had one with mixed in a certain amount of plastic, and then we had these experimental porcelain vessels where we had one side with plastic and the other side without plastic. And then, of course, when the experiment was finished, we separated both and we counted the worms which we put in the beginning of the experiment directly on a center spot of these vessels. So there were 50 worms going in, and then they could freely choose which side they would like to have, and we give them roughly a week to decide that. So we saw in the controls the worms are distributed all over the place. Then we had 2%, 4%, and 8% plastic on that, and you see that the overall toxicity was there, and also that when we have the plastic on both sides, there was an equal distribution on that. If we have plastic only on one side, and this is the graphic here, so you see we have the controls. We have on one side 2% plastic. We have we increased the plastic percentage on that side, 2%, 4%, 8%. Then you can see that the worms we found on the side with the plastic are significantly less than we found the worms on the non-polluted sides. Then we thought on, okay, let's see how the worm can really see how much plastic might be inside there. So we put on one side 2% plastic, on the other side 4%, 2%, 8%, 4%, 8%. And you can see that most of the worms prefer, obviously, to be on the side with the less plastic amount on that. That was a so-called avoidance test with that. And of course, the worms are not eating that plastic. The worms are affected by substances leaching out of this plastic material, and that's what we can show here. Then let's look at mangroves. Mangroves is a very important part of our ecosystems in the world. They are a big for little fish breeding place. They protect the landscape for wave action. So it's very good to have them in our environment. So mangroves are also at the forefront of marine pollution, because you saw what's already happening in our oceans. And of course, with wind and wave actions, a lot of plastic is transported into these mangrove forests. And you can see that here, that's a picture from India on this mangrove forest, how much plastic is already between these roots of the mangrove trees. So the idea was to take seedlings of mangroves, and we get in hand on red mangroves during that time, and expose them to microplastic particles from these different cities and treatments, and to see what would happen to these seedlings. So normally these seedlings is dropping from a mango tree into the soil and then starting to root and getting the leaves, forming a new tree on that. Here you can see what happens if we have microplastic particles. In that case, it was polyethylene on that. You see the controls. There's rooting of them. We have secondary root system. We have the first leaves coming out. And then we have these bottle cap exposure mangroves. And you can see they root. But when you compare with the others, you see that most of them missing these secondary root systems already. Also, the leaves seems smaller and a little bit more crumpled, or they have no leaves developed at all. So again, chemicals leaching out of these bottle caps have an influence on these mangrove seedlings in a not so positive way on that. So here's a bigger picture from the root system. You can see this is the control with secondary roots already. This is the exposed plants. The roots are pretty smooth and no secondary roots at all. That means with an ecological implications, less nutrient uptake, less stability for the young tree, less protection against erosion, and a slower growth of this tree at all. So that's what we can see when we expose these seedlings with microplastics. So when we look, and I concentrate on the summary on Lahti, on Singapore, what's the difference between them? UV index, average temperature, precipitation, acidity of rain, humidity. Then in Lahti we have snow cover. In Singapore we don't have. And maybe the biofilm development on these bottle caps might be different as well. So we set up a table for that and giving some points and numbers for that, and trying to develop a score system with these. And this score system showed us that Singapore ends up with an overall score of 2 and Lahti of 6. Just to see what happens. So, for example, if you look at snow cover, means Singapore 0 months. In Lahti, we have already 4 months of snow cover. And that means Lahti is much more on snow than Singapore. And that we give a score of 1 for Lahti. So that's how we score that in that. Let's see how it works out, but it was one possibility to work out a difference between these two cities. So again, back to this hypothesis. Climate conditions change the overall ecotoxicity of microplastics. Looking at these 3 cities, you can see when we look at temperature, UV light, and sun, then of course temperature is lowest in Lahti, and then UV light and sun is more in the other 2 cities. But when we look at the results from our experiments, we saw that most of the adverse effects were with the new plastic or with the plastic collected in Lahti. And we had less severe effects or no effects in plastic collected in Singapore and Port Elizabeth. So we can see that maybe the climate has a say on the ecotoxicity of microplastics on that. What can happen is with the increase of temperature and UV light in Singapore and Port Elizabeth, there might be a faster breakdown of plastic to microplastic. With that, there might be an increasing of leaching of potential toxic compounds, because the breakdown is faster, the leaching is faster. And with that, plastic which we collected from them might be less toxic within time, because already these toxic substances which might leach out of the plastic are already leached out on that. So if we ask Albert Einstein, he would say overall toxicity will not change. It's toxic, that's how it is. Only the time when it's most toxic is changing because of climate conditions. So everything is breaking down faster in a hotter climate with more UV light. But if we look at the overall toxicity of a plastic cap and the leaches which comes out, this will not change. It's only a change in time. But to be honest, it's not the plastic which is the big issue, it's us. It's us throwing it into environment, and we should keep that in mind. In Lahti, we initiate weekends where we have these plastic runs. So we got people, when they do their jogging and fitness outside, they took a bag with them, and whenever they saw some plastic particles, they just collect them from the nature and put them into the trash where it belongs, because this is not where plastic belongs. It belongs not into nature. It belongs, and of course, everyone from us would like to have plastic bottles to drink from or to wrap things in, but then we should really dispose it where it belongs, in the trash, in the recycle cycle, and not throwing it just simply into nature. With that, we have published quite a bit of our research on that. The last paper was this case study on effects of microplastic derived from bottle caps in different cities. We have some more publications brought out on the adverse effects of plastic or plastic leachate. It's not the plastic itself which is toxic, it's the substances which are leaching out of that. Then we just have looked at how can we remove microplastic from the environment. So we built up filter systems for stormwater to filter out the plastic particles. And then, of course, we were looking at these publications telling us we have microplastic everywhere. And we were thinking on if that's really true, then it's a disaster for the whole environment. But of course, when people sample, and there's enough pictures on the internet showing us people sampling microplastic, and then, for example, they have a fleece shirt on. And this fleece shirt, when you work and when you wrap your arms and do the work for sampling, then fibers are released from these fleece shirts, for example, and you will find them in your samples. And that's what we tried, having an experiment on the frozen Lake Vesijärvi in Lahti. So we just wrapped all the people helping us in red overalls, and then which were made out of cotton. And then we sampled the ice and the water on microplastics, and we saw around 55% of the red fibers from the overalls. And imagine if you sample with your fleece jacket on, this can really change a lot the microplastic counts in your sample as well. There's a new research coming up, and luckily they cited us as well from UK, showing us that we were on the correct way, and they even found out that it's 85% of contamination, of self-contamination of the scientists when sampling microplastics. Yeah, with that, if you're interested in these publications, drop me an email and I can send you a PDF on that. And I thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much. I'm open for questions now.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. That was really interesting. So really, at the end of the day, what you're saying is it's us. We're the problem. We're the ones. I think we're always going to have microplastics probably in society. It's more just what we do with them, and we're not properly disposing of them, as you're saying, right? That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's how it is. We had I had a keynote in Lahti for the Science Day 2 years ago, and we had an experiment with 2 bags of soil. And in one soil, we mixed in microplastic, which is looking like that. And in the other one, we mixed bottle caps. and then we give a forceps to each of these persons who should then take out the plastic from the soil. With the big one, it was a few seconds, and the person got all the bottle caps. With the small one, no chance. So it's really us throwing the things into nature, and as smaller it gets, as more difficult it gets to remove it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's we need to do a lot more as a society to do better for our planet. So I'm just gonna we had a really lovely comment from somebody posting, just saying that it was an excellent talk and really appreciate the research. And I would have to echo this comment too in terms of the behavior of the worms. That's really interesting, and to see that they even know that plastic's not good and they would rather be on the other side. I'm sorry if you mentioned this already. I don't recall. Did any of the worms die during that experiment?
Yeah, they die. It depends on the treatment of the plastic, but around 5% were dying. Yeah.
5% under all of those circumstances. About 5, like no matter the percentage of microplastics that was in there.
It varies between the city, and it varies, of course, on the treatment. In the controls, normally they survive 100%. So it's the leaches coming out of the plastic which also kill them, and that's a little bit the point. Different plastic, different colors. So, for example, if you have yellow plastic, it's a lot more loaded with dyes which are more toxic than other colors, and that makes the worms die off.
Is yellow the most toxic of all plastics?
What we saw in the lab, yes. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Never would have thought that color would play that kind of a role in it.
Yeah, but it does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, clearly it does. Just a reminder to anyone to ask some more questions. So while we're waiting for some questions, I have some more questions as well. I found it really interesting in terms of the difference by city and climate, as you were saying. And so what you were saying is that the breakdown is greater in hotter temperatures.
Yeah.
So that's why in Singapore in particular, we saw that kind of result.
Yeah, that's right. The plastic is much more exposed to UV light and to higher temperature, and that makes it more, really decaying faster, setting free the toxic compounds much faster. So when we picked it up in Singapore, and we don't know the age of these bottle caps, of course, which we picked up, but probably most of them were not as toxic anymore as when we collected in a cold climate in Lahti.
Are there more bottle caps in those in some of the hotter environments, say, than the colder ones? Did you see a difference in the number?
No, humans are very much the same in every country. They throw these things into the nature, and the only difference is in Singapore you have these wonderful signs saying 5,000 Singapore dollars fees, but even close to these signs you find the plastic and not only bottle caps.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with the sign. Yeah. I think even when you see recycling bins or garbage bins, you still see it on the side of it. People could have just walked a few more steps over. Yeah. We have a few questions that have come in. Just going to also check this one. All right. So, does recycling actually help reduce the amount of microplastics?
Yeah, of course. When you put the plastic, for example, this plastic bottle into the recycling bin where it belongs, then it's not in the nature, it cannot break down, and it will not produce microplastics. That's easy. That's why I said it's us who are polluting the environment with microplastics, and that's an issue. If we would not throw it into nature, we would not have this issue.
Yes, so, but I'm guessing, but probably still, if we reduce the amount of plastics we made, hopefully that would also result in a reduction. But
yeah, but no,
it won't. No,
because we have really to think about how can we get the microplastics out of the environment, which is already in there for 20 years. So we have to find methods to get plastic out of soil. When you look at here, this is agricultural soil, and it's not very visible, but you can see some plastic particles in that. How to get the plastic out of that soil? And there are methods out there. We tried, for example, with olive oil to get the plastic out. and then to clean the soil again from the olive oil. But that's very cost-intensive things. Maybe if the strike is going on and I have to give a third presentation, I can present you our plant gill system, which is sounding quite funny, like a fish gill, but we developed a system with used plant materials and plant materials which can filter in a way these microplastic particles.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying more, so just to keep the tension for the third talk, maybe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we've had a few questions that have come through. Okay, great presentation. Thank you for your time and research. I was wondering what the toxicity level effects are on soil fertility from plastic agriculture. I was thinking of this exact same thing about what the effects are on the soil fertility and on our food.
Yeah, as you see, we tested a lot of different plants from agriculture, and all the time the plants stay much smaller when there are plastic particles in the soil. There is no uptake of the particles itself in the plant.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't worry about that you bite on plastic when you eat your carrot.
Yeah.
But the substances, the chemicals leaching out of the plastic is making this effect. And that's, of course, taken up by the plant, and you eat then these chemicals, which are, for example, plasticizers and all these, which are bisphenol A, which makes an effect on humans as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really too bad. Next question. Teddy, if you want to post that. Are you and your team considering assessing the microplastic toxicity on other soil organisms, etc., microbes?
At the moment, as I'm the dean, my hands are bound. I have to look for my faculty. So some of my team is still working on microplastics in Helsinki and also in Korea on that. But it's very handy to use these Enchi-train worms because they give such a clear answer what happens. So we are sticking to our model, but other groups from scientists, they are using soil bacteria and seeing what happens with them. And they see drastic changes in the biodiversity in soil when there's plastic inside. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And the next question. So many products that we use every day are plastic or have plastic parts. Can you see a way through our dependence on them to a brighter day?
Yeah. I think we have a lot of brilliant minds who develop kind of plastic which are not plastic or which are dissolving then. I saw a YouTube video with plastic bags which dissolve in water. Just making plastic or plastic similar type of material out of starch from wheat or from corn. That might be a possibility to reduce the plastic, or to make plastic materials which you don't throw away. You know, that's the point. If we start using always these cups for our coffee, that might be not very clever. But if we use reusable bottles, that
Right.
might help, and that's how it is. So even if we use these kind of more stable things which we can reuse the next 5 to 10 years, that would help as well.
Yeah.
Avoid single-use plastic. That's how we can help the nature to go forward, and don't throw it in the environment again.
No, like plastic bags, as you're saying.
Yeah.
From grocery stores and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see that when I was arriving here, Safeways was using
Yes.
plastic bags, and nowadays they ask you for your reusable bag.
Yeah.
They don't have plastic bags anymore, and that's exactly a good step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is single-use plastics that are, and
Yeah.
plastic water bottles too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. There aren't any questions yet, but I'll just put another plug in for anybody who's got any other questions for a speaker today on plastics and whatnot. While we have you, while we're just waiting for some more questions, you were alluding to, and I'm going to be suggesting it a little bit later on, that we may have more presentations from you, which is wonderful. So, what other sorts of research topics, just to put a bit of a plug out there of some breadcrumbs as to what you might also be able to speak on?
Yeah. Normally, my main work in science is working on cyanobacteria and cyanobacterial toxins. So on these little organisms which are coloring our lakes green in the summertime, and also here in Manitoba, I saw that a lot happening in summer at Lake Winnipeg and Lake Manitoba. So I'm working on the toxins of that and on the bloom formations, what makes these organisms blooming, and then really making these mass developments. So I look at that. I look at the toxins they have, and they are quite powerful, giving us liver cancer, lung cancer, for example. So this is something which is part of my work as an ecotoxicologist. And of course, I like to combine my fundamental research with applied research. So always thinking on what can we do to mitigate the effect of these toxins, for example. And that's where we developed a system which is again called Green Liver. This is the system works a little bit like our liver. That's why we called it Green Liver, but it's using aquatic plants for the detoxification and for the complete removal of these cyanobacterial toxins from water. That would be my next presentation, showing you these green liver systems and how it works. And we had systems built up in People's Republic of China, and they are purifying water for drinking water for 5 million people at the moment. We have systems in Australia, in South Africa, in Brazil, and in Korea, and working all the same, just looking at Mother Nature and using plants which are there already, so no neophyte traffic or whatever, so using the plants of that area to keep the water clean. And that's
that I really would like you to, I'd love to hear that presentation. As you're alluding to Lake Winnipeg, it's a very hot topic here in Manitoba for many people who use that wonderful lake as a cottages for swimming, even the fishing community. It is a significant issue. So, okay, so that's great. So stay tuned, everybody, for the next topic. But we do have another question that's come through, and that is, are there any new projects happening related to plastic issues in your faculty?
We have a colleague who is submitting the characterization of plastic and soil material. So when you think on, you have these little plastic particles, and you don't know which type of plastic it is. So we have to have a rapid and fast analytical tool on hand to see what type of particle is it, and where it comes from. And one colleague is doing that. I by myself, I work on that at the moment, and that's polyurethane, and that's made for sport places and for children playgrounds. When children have
the turf on play that spongy turf, you're saying? Okay.
Turf, that's this one. And when these playgrounds are made, you solve these plastic with organic solvent, which is a horrible smell and not good for the environment. And then, of course, these plastic particles, they break apart with the weathering, of course, and then they go into the soil. And I'm at the moment having a little project together with my son. He's playing at the playground, and Daddy is just counting particles in soil and soil columns. And some other colleagues from my group are working in Helsinki and in Korea on the toxicity of polyurethane on different organisms, again on anti-drain and on germination of some plant seeds. So that's at the moment in work. And we expect the first publications going out maybe spring next year.
Okay, that's very interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's, it's safety for when kids fall down, and, there's reasons for having it in play structures, but it's not good for our environment. So very interesting. Another question has come through. Let me just peek at it. Okay. All right. It is. Can you talk more about plastics in clothing? You were talking about fleece, I think, or in your presentation. Should we stop wearing our fleece jackets?
No, I love fleece jackets. don't stop it. But yeah, of course, it's what we saw in small projects we had. It's the quality which makes a fleece jacket. If you buy a cheap fleece jacket, then you have up to 4,500 fibers coming out of your washing machine. That's very clear, and the fibers look like that. So this is the raw material of fleece jacket. These are the little fibers, and they coming out of your washing machine with every washing of your jacket or whatever you have. The amount of these fibers coming out depends on the quality of the clothing you have. That's pretty good. So we can correlate that with some brands. I will not make merchandising, but you can see higher quality, less fibers. And I'm very lucky on that. I have two school kids which choose me as their mentor here in Winnipeg, and we are working on a system to remove these fibers from the effluent of washing machines. Building up a little system with filter material derived from plants like coconut fibers, and building up a filter which will remove these fibers before the water is really going into the wastewater system, because these fibers you can't get out anymore when they are in these big systems. So we are dreaming of building a small little filter system for each washing machine that you can filter these out and save a little bit the environment for this plastic material. And these are two school students here from Winnipeg, and I'm very happy to have them and to help them with their science project.
Wonderful. Okay, a few more questions have come through. How do we know which everyday products like toothpaste and cosmetics contain microplastics so we can avoid them?
Yeah, normally, and that's written on the package itself. Whether there's microplastic inside, yes or no, you can see it. Most of the toothpaste, for example, are at the moment avoiding that, to have microplastic inside. But of course, you have some shower gels and all these things where you can clearly see there's polyethylene inside or polypropylene inside. And then you just go to some other brands where they clearly state it's plastic free.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to do it. The other point is, of course, when you get your coffee, tell the person, "Oh, I don't need a lid."
Okay.
Easy, yeah.
Great.
And it's even better for you, because this lid might, when it's having your hot coffee inside, it might leach out some bisphenols, and you don't like that in your coffee. That's an easy way to avoid plastic on that.
Okay. Great to know. Next time I'll do that. Okay, another question that came through. If the plastic dissolved in water, would it be totally gone, or is it contaminating the water?
Yeah, that's a good question. And when I saw this YouTube video where they dissolved the plastic bag completely in water, I was immediately having the same question. I would love to have this water tested with my biotest systems to see what happens, because, of course, dissolving means not that everything is gone. The chemicals which are made this plastic material, they are still there. They are just dissolved in water and you can't see it anymore. But technically, they are still in the water and may have adverse effects on that. So, yeah, it's a thing to test and to see what really happens and what is left on that. We have here in my faculty, we have nice LC-MS machines, so mass spectrometry machines, where we can follow up single chemicals and to see where they are and how they are looking like. And it would be another good project to look at that, definitely.
Okay, great. And a last question that we have is, what systems have you seen in Germany or other places you visited that reduce of plastics in the environment that are absent here in Manitoba?
Honestly, I arrived here a year ago, and I was shocked on the recycling systems here. Because coming from Germany and coming from Finland, we have different places to put the things in. Yeah, we have a place to put the waste food. We have a place to put the plastic. We have a place to put metals, and we have a place to put the rest. And here, obviously, most of the stuff is going into the same waste, and then is sorted out in a way. Yeah, but this is double work. And this work is really put on the people themselves in countries like Finland and Germany. You have to sort it. And that is much more that you are involved in this process. And when you are involved in this process, this helps a lot understanding what you're doing and understanding how to reduce plastic in your daily life, because you have to sort it out. And when you are at -25 standing in front of your trash bins and just sorting out things, that is very unpleasant. So you think twice what to do. And I think that would be a good thing here in Manitoba to really see that we have this a little bit more adapted, and put on the people to do that. With my own apartment where I'm living in, I see people are throwing in their stuff. It doesn't matter where. So they throw food items into recycle bins, which should not have food items. And I think being a little bit more strict on that would help, and would make the life of recycling companies much easier.
No, very good advice. I think, yes, us doing our own sorting would be it's a great tip. Well, those are all the questions, and we've come to the end of our time, the end of the hour here. So thank you so much for that very interesting, informative presentation, and for everybody on the call to stay tuned for further presentations as he's alluded to other topics. So thank you to everybody for participating. We will be sending you a link to today's session, as well as a survey where you can share your thoughts about the presentation, other topics, other presenters. Please do respond, as it's the only way that we're able to improve. So as I was mentioning, there will definitely be a presentation next week, either by Dr. Pflugmacher Lima or perhaps by another researcher, but we are sort of just waiting until what happens with the labor disruption. So we will keep you posted, but there will definitely be a presentation next week. But just stay tuned and look at your inboxes to see what that presentation will be. If you haven't registered for next week, I encourage you to go on our website and do that right away, because as I said, there will be a presentation that will be climate and or environment related. So please do that. We really do appreciate your flexibility and your understanding during this time. If you have any questions about this or other programming that we offer to our alumni and friends, you're welcome to email the Alumni Relations Unit at alumni@umanitoba.ca. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Have a great day, and we will see you very soon.